Well, hey, world, welcome to our very first podcast here at the RC Air Experience. My name is Jonathan from the lighter side of RC. And on the other side of the screen, we have Anthony from.
FPV builds.
There we go. So, Anthony and I joined forces. I don't know how long ago it was, but maybe a month and a bit ago, we
Yeah,
started talking about this. And
in brief.
here we are making it happen.
Yeah. I saw one of his. I've been full transparency. I've been a big fan of Jonathan since, or I call him John, but I've been a big fan of his videos since he posted his L39 video.
Wow,
That was
that was
the
a long
that
time
was the
ago.
that was the. It doesn't seem like it was that long though. You grew pretty
4 years.
fast. Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
I feel like it was only maybe 2 years ago. But
yeah.
yeah,
It's amazing how quickly it goes by. So
yeah, that was the first video I saw, and I was like, wow, that's a cool plane. This guy gets to play with cool stuff. I gotta follow him.
thanks.
I remember, and it was like the video wasn't like well done. It was like dimly
Yes.
lit in your
Oh
garage. It was
yeah.
like one of your first videos.
I was using my GoPro. I think it was an Action 3 or 2 or some sort of model like that, and it was just terrible, right? I look back at those videos now, and they're just brutal. But
Everybody has to start someplace.
exactly.
I've only been doing this for a couple months now, and even I look at the first couple of things I uploaded, and I'm like, wow. Even the stuff I upload sometimes now, I'm like, this needs to be better. But it comes down to that whole time and perfection over production type
Yeah,
thing, right? It's
yeah,
you want to get content out that people can watch. I'm not a movie theater or studio, so I just gotta get the stuff out that people can watch, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I appreciate you, Anthony, for actually reaching out to me. I know sometimes it takes a lot of guts for people to actually reach out and offer up opportunities like this. And whether you're reaching out to a creator or a company or whatever it is, it does take some effort to make it happen. And timing was just right. I mean, I've been talking about doing a podcast now for quite a while since we started the After Dark channel, and now we're
yep,
actually making it happen, which is super cool. So
yeah. That's what started it out, actually. I was watching the After Dark episode, and I've been thinking about doing a podcast for a while too.
mhm.
Um, the funny thing about me is I've been recording videos. I'm always the guy at the flying field with all my friends, like, hey, record this, hey, record this. I've been doing
Yeah.
that probably for 4 years, and I have so much stuff that I have to edit and go through.
Wow.
But it was your RC After Dark. I saw you say you were thinking about doing a podcast, and I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to reach out to him because I've been thinking about the same thing.
Yeah, it was
And the
perfect timing.
idea, my vision, just so everybody understands, when I was reaching out to John, I understand John's been doing this longer than I have. He has more subscribers and followers than I do. But my theory behind it all is we kind of get to blend the two worlds, and that's why we're calling it the RC Air Experience. I'm a foaming and FPV quad, and I put FPV on all my planes guy, and he's the high end, $30,000 turbine guy. You know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah.
more than $30,000. That might be light. But that's the world he's in. But at the same time, I like all things that fly, and I think a lot of people who are into model aviation have a respect for all things that fly, and I think it's good bringing our worlds
Yeah.
together. I think it's great for the viewers.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. I think there's a lot of stigma there as well too. And my original channel, people think the lighter side of RC has something to do with a play on the value of things that we do here, but it actually has nothing to do with monetary value. What it actually has to do with is basically the non-political go out and have fun side of RC flying, which it's very similar to what you're just saying. Like,
right?
if somebody's at the field flying a prop plane or a foamy or a EDF, I have just as much respect for them as I do somebody flying a $40,000 turbine jet. I mean, we're all out there to have fun, and that's what it's all about for me. So
Right, right. And a lot of people, especially, down by me in the States, and I'm in the US, and John's in Canada. But yeah, a lot of the clubs for what I do, um, a lot of the clubs are just so against FPV, and it's just like, I have the same plane as you. I just want to fly on a
Yeah.
nice field like you, or a runway. Like, let me in,
Yeah.
and then they're starting to get a little bit better. They realize, like, and even the AMA, they have to change because the
Hmm.
hobby's changing.
Yeah.
I mean, it, you know, I see a huge transition from people who go out, buy a DJI drone or something like that, or even a cheaper drone off of Amazon and start playing with it
Yeah.
and go, wow, this is cool. And then they start getting into airplanes.
Yeah.
And then it goes from there.
Yeah.
Next thing
It's
you know,
definitely a progression for sure.
right. Next thing you know, they have $100,000 turbines.
Yep.
That's just
That's stretching it. Well, unless you have a whole bunch of planes, then it could easily get
right.
there. So
Right. I've messaged John so many times in his videos, by the way, saying, hey, you need to put an FPV setup on one of those planes. It just has to happen. Just got to fly one
yeah.
from the cockpit. Got to
Yeah.
do it.
It would be
Yeah.
cool for sure.
Yeah, it would be. I remember one of the things though from that video, from the L39 video, and I forgot exactly what was said, but your wife was like, "How much does this cost?" And you're like, "I don't know, I forgot what the number was." And she's like, "So it's this or a car?" And he's like, "This is so
Yeah.
much cooler than a car." Like, I was cracking up. I'm like, it's so true though, right? Like, we would
It's so
absolutely have the
true.
jet over a minivan, like, any
Yeah.
day of the week.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's great. Yeah, there's some good stuff there.
So a little bit of history about you, Anthony. So you're how long have you been flying for?
So I I've had a long history with RC. I was really into cars when I was younger. Did a little bit of like amateurish slash semi-pro racing when I was younger with the cars and the stadium trucks and stuff like that. My dad was a balsa guy, and
Okay.
I started when I was probably 8 years old, building my first balsa plane with him.
Hmm.
And that was when flying was really hard. Like, you would spend a year building something and then you'd throw it in the air and it
Yeah.
would smash into a million pieces and it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I started with my dad way back when.
Hmm.
Got out of flying for a little bit and then I started picking it up again, like 2015-ish. I used to play with cars, and once I had kids, cars just became way too expensive.
Yeah.
So I got rid of cars and started getting into drones and FPV and stuff, and then I started getting back into planes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah, it's I love flying. It's fun. I like. I'm a warbird guy. Getting into warbirds got me into learning all about World War II, and
Hmm.
I mean the wavos on some of those guys. When you think about what they did, taking a plane while somebody's shooting flak at them and diving towards a ship, it's just, that's the stuff that I think is really cool, and that
Yeah.
I have respect for that kind of stuff in aviation. So,
Yeah.
what
Awesome.
about you?
Well, when I was younger, I guess in my late teens, I did the car thing as well too. I remember that time, like going into the hobby shop. So that would have been like 2000 and, or sorry, that's not 2000. That would have been like 1997 ish. I remember going into the hobby shops and stuff and getting into the cars, but going over to the plane side of things and just obviously being overwhelmed and having no idea how that even worked or whatever. But so I did cars for a little bit with a friend. Never really did anything, just kind of mucked around the yard, and we would go to the racetrack and just play around there. But and then I didn't do anything with RC stuff for a long time. And one of the jobs I had, I started there in 2005, and I remember it was probably 2007. My boss came in one day and he's like, "You got to check this out," because he knew I was kind of interested in this stuff. And he had this RC crawler, and first time I've ever even heard of such a thing. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. So, anyways, I went back to the model store, looked at a crawler, found a crawler, ended up buying one. Then I'm like, I'm going to go to the plane section. So I went over to the plane section. So this is like 2000, maybe seven, I think, right? And I remember seeing all of this cool stuff, including helicopters. That was the big thing for me. I'm like, they have helicopters? Obviously, they did back when I was younger,
Yeah.
but so I ended up buying a helicopter too, and taught myself to fly helis. Like nobody around, had no idea what I was doing, just looking on the internet, putting the ping pong balls on the sticks. Right, it was a little Align 450, and I taught myself to fly, and then I ended up going to this indoor flying session. Met a couple guys, and one of the guys there, his name was Andrew, or Andrew is his name. He's obviously still around, but we became good friends. We had a mutual friend, and started flying helis together. And so this would have been like maybe 2008-ish, I think. And he called me up one day. He's like, "Man, you got to come to the field and check this thing out." And I was like, "What is it?" He's like, "Just come." So we ended up going to the field, and he had this, and I'm going to be gentle with this. It was like a black piece of junk with a turbine strapped on the back. I don't even remember what it was. And he started it up, and I'm like, that is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And so that was my transition. I basically started with helis. I was flying T-Rex 700s, nitros, and stuff. That's kind of what I finished flying helis with, and just jumped right into turbines. I did buy a fixed wing, like a little foamy AeroWorks thing, but yeah. So I've been flying turbines since I think about 2009, I believe, is when I bought
Yeah.
my first one. So
That's
yeah.
pretty cool. That's a pretty big progression going from helis to turbines. I think
Well, the funny
you
the
skipped a
funny
couple
thing
of steps
is,
there, buddy.
yeah, the funny thing is, like, I got to the point in helis, like I wasn't doing anything crazy. I was doing like some inverted flight, some pyro flips, whatever they're called.
Okay.
Um, so when I flew my first fixed wing, I was like, well, this thing's easy to fly as long as it's moving forward, it's flying, right? Like it's so much easier than flying a helicopter because it doesn't like change like directions on your
Right.
sticks as much. So I mean, yeah, I probably was a little overzealous, but yeah, it was in my mind easier to fly. Um, Landing was the biggest learning curve, and that took me quite a while. So,
I was trying
but
to grab this.
yeah, it was
I was trying to grab this. So I had this
nice.
under my table. Yeah, it's under my desk. So it's this was my first remote control car I ever
Yeah.
got. And I
Wow.
actually got it from my brother.
Yeah.
And he was older than me and he was done playing with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a crazy hobby. It's just RC is just a
Yeah, for
crazy,
sure.
crazy world.
Yeah, I would have never thought, going back even, I don't know, even going back 5 years, I would have never thought that I would be where I am today. But going back 10 years, obviously, it's like, you know,
Right.
couldn't fathom what I'm doing today at all. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that really opened me up to um, the whole thing. Yeah, I've always been kind of mechanically inclined and stuff. And
yeah.
when I started building my own FPV drones and just seeing what the technology was and like what they could do and like what you could build and then do
Hmm.
with it, it just kind of blew me away. Like the technology part of it is
Yeah.
even with the stuff you're doing, right? With
Yeah.
the controllers, I mean, it's so much better than it was
Yeah.
20 years ago. It's so much
Absolutely.
better. It makes it a lot easier for people to get into the hobby too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you could buy a plane now for $200-300 with
Yeah.
a remote and a battery and a gyro, and people
Yeah.
can learn how to fly and not have that frustration of smashing it on the first time out.
Absolutely. Yeah, and
So
even
the barrier,
even on the turbine side of things, the past 5 years we've seen things change a lot too, where the systems are getting simpler. We've got foam turbine aircraft now, which they're built very well, and your entry level or your point of entry is so much lower than it used to be.
yeah,
And yeah, it's really bringing a lot of people into the hobby.
Turbines are still costly though, because I've looked at them. At
Yeah.
some point I will have an FPV turbine jet. My wife doesn't know that yet. She will eventually, but I'm sure she will when she watches this episode. But you know, I saw somebody in a group. I'm in a bunch of groups on Facebook. I'm in like 30 groups
Hmm.
on Facebook. It's good though. It keeps me in touch with the community. Somebody was 3D printing a plane and putting a turbine in it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
how's that going to work with the temperature of it all though? Because 3D
Well, it's
printed
like
planes, they melt. Like,
yeah, it's like the foamy aircraft. The thing about it is there's number one, there's so much airflow going through the aircraft with the turbine.
okay,
But as long as you're using most of the planes that you're going to find out there, or even conversion kits for a foam aircraft, they're going to have a dual walled pipe. So there's an inner layer and then an outer layer about, let's say, a 1/4 inch space in between. And as long as things are set up properly, the turbine exhaust coming through the center pipe is actually, the Venturi effect is pulling air between those two pipes. So if you have the turbine running, in most cases, you could probably touch the outside layer or the outside pipe with your hand,
okay,
and it wouldn't burn your hand
wow.
because there's so much airflow there. So yeah, the cooling is important and the heat protection is important. So
So it's almost like a thermos, basically, where like the inner
yeah,
stuff is warm, and then the outside layer you can't really feel. So that cushion of air around it is what's
yeah,
that's
what's
pretty
keeping
cool.
the temperature down? Yeah, and there are airplanes too that you have to put some more thought into it. Like I built an airplane; it's sitting up there out of view, but I built an airplane up there, and we put an afterburner light around the exhaust right at the back. It's a sports jet, and there's the exhaust tube, the fuselage, and there's a little bit of space in between those two with a couple venting holes. And the afterburner light covered those venting holes. So it's important to have some way for the air to get out, even
Right.
if it's not going over your pipe, right? So I actually added an additional hole just under the vertical stab or the rudder surface, just to have some to kind of replace that airflow that I was blocking. So you have to give quite a bit of thought to those things sometimes.
Yeah, you would think that that light ring would melt as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have any turbine experience, but I'm just imagining they get. I mean, it's a jet turbine, so it's got to be
Yeah.
hot at the end of it, right? I mean, I don't know how. What's the flame? What's the temperature on one of those average that's coming out of the back of that
Um,
thing? I mean,
so the temperature at the like so the little data screen that plugs in, it's called the GSU, the ground support unit. So the GSU tells you your temperature the turbine is running at. So that's going to vary between manufacturers, but let's just say most manufacturers, the temperature inside is going to be 300 to 700 degrees, somewhere in that range. Yeah. So it's definitely hot. Like when you're at full throttle and I'm doing a test run on a turbine or a setup or whatever, the exhaust cone glows red. Like
wow,
it's red. So
wow,
yeah.
that's pretty
So
cool that
they're
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 able to
hot.
put those. It is pretty cool they're able to put those in foam birds now. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool that they're able to do that because it.
Yeah.
I've looked at a bunch of those kits. Um, you know, turbine planes, composite planes and stuff like that. And, it seems like a pretty low end kit is 2,500 to $3,000 for not a crazy airframe, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with the foam, it allows people to spend, 800, $1,000 on an
Exactly.
airframe and get
Yeah.
into it and
Yeah, for
not lose a
sure.
lot when you crash too. That's the other part of it.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
use using a smaller turbine too also saves money as well. Like a smaller Zyko X45 turbine, they're going to range, I don't even know what they're going for now, like $1,500 to $2,000. So, the point of entry when you have a smaller turbine is a lot lower as well. So
Still a lot of money to have
it
in a
is,
toy
yeah,
that flies in the air. If you think about it,
yeah,
it still adds up to a
yeah,
lot of money that you're flying in the
it
air as a
does
toy.
for sure.
You know, it's
Yeah,
I
and a
mean,
lot
you've
of
had some.
people like,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was gonna say
I was
you've
going to say
had
a
some
lot.
heartbreaking things lately, right?
Oh,
You had a pretty heartbreaking crash, right? So you know the
it's
feeling.
been a real sucky year and a half, I think. Yeah, it's been about a year and a half that of all the crashes have happened. Yeah, it's been a rough year and a half. So
What'd you lose?
My
I know we
fleet, my fleet would
Diamond.
be a lot bigger now if I didn't. Yeah. So the very first one was the Diamond. Problem with the Diamond was, so at that time I was using a JR28X radio system, and they have these boxes. At the time, it was an 11 BPX and a 16 BPX. Now I think they have the Pro version, which is different. So that 11 BPX is like your main power distribution hub. So your receivers plug into there, your servos plug into there, your batteries plug into there, and that helps spread the load out in layman's terms. So what happened was I was flying that day. I did 3 flights. It was actually an air show that we were putting on at our field. And one of my buddies said, "Hey, my daughter just showed up. Can you do the 4th flight?" "Yeah, sure, no problem." So I took off and I was flying probably 5 minutes into the flight. And I was headed west, and I was just starting to make my turn to come back. And as soon as I banked the plane, turbine shut off. I had 0 control, and the plane just went for quite a while as it started its downward slope. And it was, I mean, fortunately at that field we were at, we're surrounded by farmers' field. Like there's nothing around us. It probably was a 20-minute walk to the site.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really far, and there was obviously nothing left. It basically went straight in, really fast. So, but what happened was we dissected the little box, and unfortunately there was a part inside the box that came unsoldered. And one of my electrical engineer friends that has a lot of experience with that stuff said that that part should never come unsoldered. So of course, as soon as that power, it was part of the power system. As soon as that came unsoldered, like there's nothing that's going to work in the plane, right? So
Was his theory that it got too hot and the solder melted,
um it
or
looked
just
that way because
vibration?
there was solder residue everywhere. So
Right.
he said like maybe it happened during the crash, but that was my initial thought, and that's why I asked him to take a look at it. But what he said was that part, because it's about a half-inch by half-inch board that that's soldered to the board, the main board, and there's 4 fingers or 2 fingers that go through the board that's soldered. So he said that that should never come apart. Like even if you throw the whole thing against the ground, the board should shatter before that part desolders itself. So
That's interesting.
yeah, so that was
That's
number one.
interesting.
That one sucks the most because well, they all suck, but that one really hurts because it's not. I would rather dumb thumb a plane into the ground knowing
Right.
that it was me, right?
Right. Right.
Versus an electronic issue, because we try and buy the best electronics possible, so that stuff doesn't happen.
I also had the feeling that, and I could be wrong, but when you got that plane, I like your videos, you could show your
Hmm.
excitement. Like you
Oh
you
yeah,
really loved that. That was a nice plane. The color was
it
nice.
was.
Like
It
so it
looked like when
hurts.
people would see that thing flying, like it didn't
Yeah.
look like it should fly, and it would look like it was something from the 1940s, right? And the lighting kit on it from Sky Candy was just unbelievable. So it was so nice,
It
so
was a nice
nice.
plane. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was you could
yeah,
tell you were really excited about it. You really liked that plane. And
yeah,
it sucks when you lose a good plane like that. What'd you
yeah.
have
We don't
after the
make it
Diamond?
anymore either. After the Diamond was my Huracan, and the
Oh,
Huracan
that's
one
right.
was so stupid. Basically, I was really low to the ground coming out of a square loop, and yeah, I basically stalled the plane. I was like seriously 4 feet above the ground ish, but because the plane was so heavy, like it was 65 pounds, I think, dry.
Wow.
Because it was so heavy, when it stalled, the wingtip hit, and then the nose hit, and it just split the fuselage in half.
Wow.
So that one sucked. I really liked flying that one, but it was a really heavy plane. So now, if you buy that plane, they actually make it. It's quite a few pounds lighter, like multiple pounds lighter, just with the construction differences, which is awesome. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I've got my Kinetics as the replacement, and it's a way lighter plane, way nicer flyer. And then the most recent one, the number 3, which finished me off, so I shouldn't have any more bad issues for a long time, That was my bull, and that one was hard as well too. That was my very first flight of this year. Was the bull. So
I didn't see what happened with that one. I'm not caught up on that. What?
so that one, what ended up happening, and it actually I released I think 3 or 4 videos dissecting the telemetry from our radio system, and that's actually kind of proves your point of what you talked about earlier with our technology. The radio systems are so amazing right now, and the telemetry it can record. Because of that, it actually helped me figure out what happened to cause the crash. So it was actually on this second flight. So flight number 1, I did the maiden on the plane. I didn't turn the lights on. I think I turned them on briefly during the landing, and the maiden flight went without a hitch. It was no issues. Second flight, I turned the lights on at some point in the flight. I can't remember if it was the beginning or during the flight. And I had my light wire bundle, which was basically all my wires and connections, just all bundled together underneath the main board. And I had a little, it's called a V-Speak module, which is like your turbine telemetry, and it's actually has the signal for your turbine going through that. Those 2 things were right beside each other, and I didn't think it would cause an issue. But what happened was I was doing my final approach, and the engine was running, but my throttle stick was working intermittently. So I was giving
Wow.
it throttle. So basically I was on my downwind leg. A plane started to get really slow. The back end started to drop, and I was like, what's going on? So I'm adding throttle, full throttle, nothing's happening. Gears down, flaps are down. And so what I did was I pulled the flaps up to try and keep more speed, put the nose down, tried to turn because I was out, and I tried to turn back to the runway, and it basically stalled and broke the plane. So, but
Is that
initially
a?
I didn't know what had happened. Right, it took weeks of dissecting the telemetry to figure it out.
Yeah, I know the Diamond was a total loss. The Bull was a total loss too.
Um, the bull and the Huracan, not really, because like when you stall it in like that, it's really not. It's not the end of the world. Like the turbine goes back, it gets checked over, rebalanced typically, but the other stuff, yeah, it's really not a big deal. I would reuse those servos, no problem. The Diamond, everything went in the garbage.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the Diamond was probably a better case scenario because all the power was off. So when the power is off and you go in, your servos aren't resisting the impact. But
Right.
still, an impact like that, I would never use anything from a crash like that.
Yeah. I only had one bad crash this year, and it was with a plane I really loved. It was with my
Mm-hmm.
Corsair, and it was me just being dumb. That's the best way I can describe it.
Well, those are the
So
best kind of crashes.
I keep seeing people from YouTube and FPV groups and stuff like that, being able to fly through clouds and above clouds and like fly in the clouds.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've been chasing for a while. And my Corsair had a different motor, you see, like it was way faster than it should have been.
Yeah.
And it was a day we had low cloud coverage. Now, low cloud coverage for us, it doesn't really happen. We're not in the mountains. Like,
Yeah.
it's far and few between. And there was a day I thought it was possible, and I'm not going to say what altitude they were because I don't want anybody from the FAA to,
Yeah.
knock on my door. So I thought it would be great. I was like, there they are. They're nice and fluffy. I'm going to poke the clouds today. And I put the biggest battery I had and straight up into the air like a rocket, just straight
Yeah.
up, full throttle, just all the way up, just straight vertical. I got to the bottom of the clouds, and all of a sudden, and I use good stuff. I use good video components. I use good receivers. Everything. I was using my R9 system, and in your video testing, you saw some of those systems. You could turn up the voltage on the
Yeah.
transmitters to 500, 1,000 milliwatts, whatever. And my stuff's usually
Yeah.
cranked up, right?
Yeah.
So it starts getting weird and fuzzy, and all of a sudden I'm getting weird feedback, and it's like doing weird things. and I just lost everything out of nowhere. Like I
Yeah.
still had video, but nothing was working, and it lawn
So
darted.
you're flying this FPV, correct?
Yeah, yep,
Okay. Okay.
flying at FPV in the
Yeah.
goggles, and
Yeah.
it's so much worse when you're flying an FPV and you can feel because you're in the plane and you
Yeah.
know there's something not going right, like the wings dropping for no reason, like it just things are going wrong. And it's like watching your own crash, like you watch yourself smash into the ground. It's so much worse. Like
Jeez.
turns out those clouds I was trying to poke into,
Yeah.
literally a minute after, I mean, I lawn darted this thing. There was nothing left. There was just
Hmm.
foam and bits of pieces, and the motor was 30 feet away. It was bad. Um, Severe thunderstorm, like a minute after I crashed. It
Oh
was a, it was,
wow.
it was a thunderstorm cloud. It was all electrical interference. It killed the
Yeah.
plane. It just
Wow.
the electrical interference, the static electricity from the clouds, whatever it was, just completely wiped out the control link. And that was it. It
Crazy.
was, I've been further and higher than that before with my stuff, never had a
Yeah.
problem. It was so bad. And it was a great plane. It was like my little hot rod. It was just a fun plane to fly.
Nice.
So yeah, I got another one now. I gotta get to putting all the good stuff back in it and
Yeah.
put the hot rod motor in with the bigger ESCs and stuff and go from there. But yeah, that one hurt. That was the only plane I lost this year.
Hmm.
Didn't get to fly as much as I wanted to this year.
So would you
But
guys what's your flying season typically?
so
So
it's
you're in New
honestly,
York, correct?
yeah, I'm in New York. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I'm on the island actually.
Okay.
It's right now, so like last weekend I went out for a pack or two. It's
Hmm.
still kind of 50-ish degrees right now, so you can still kind of go out. There's no snow.
Hmm.
Um, we can go out, December, January, February is cold. There's some hardcore people who still go out and fly if there's no snow or rain on the ground.
Yeah.
Um, but March through October is fair game.
Okay. So
It's a little bit
very
longer
similar to
than
us.
yours.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
probably a little bit longer because you get cold a lot faster, right? I mean,
Yeah, and we don't really like it depends on the year, but we really don't get good weather until like May, in
yeah,
March. 10 years ago in March, it was really nice, but the past 8 years have absolutely stunk in March. So, um,
yeah,
yeah, our
yeah.
season's pretty short. So,
But I would much rather live and fly where you are than where I am.
well, yeah, you're
You
pretty
have,
congested where you are.
yeah, yeah. We have some spots that we have to fly at. It's kind of a pain in the butt. I go upstate.
Yeah,
There's places I fly upstate that's nice and open trees, mountains for
nice.
miles, and I don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm envious of everybody who just like walks out their door and there's just miles of flat land.
yeah,
It's just it's I would fly all the time.
yeah,
Like we have to drive. I got to go half an hour, 40 minutes to a good spot to fly. Like
yeah.
load all my stuff up. That's my dream right there. It's my retirement dream is to live on a farm someplace that I could literally. I will build a runway in the front of my house so I could just literally be 70 years old in a rocking chair and take off from my runway.
I
That
think many of us RC guys have that same dream. So
yeah, that's my dream right there. I got to get out of the island and go get someplace like that.
hopefully
It'll
not
happen
when we're
eventually.
70. Hopefully sooner.
Oh well, it's where everything's going in this world right now with the economy and everything. It looks like 70 is getting, I don't know. Everything's so expensive right now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The world's
Well,
getting.
70's not that old anymore, really. Like if you take care of yourself, it's there's a lot of good 70-year-olds out there that are still doing a lot of work.
My dad is 78 and he walks 3 miles every day. He'd still
Wow.
kick my butt. Like he's in such great shape. It's ridiculous.
Nice.
And it's 78 and it's amazing. So yeah, two
So how
hips
many
replaced.
planes crazy. How many planes do you have?
Um,
Or how many aircraft do you have? That's a better question for you.
oh, total all in
Yeah.
between FPV drones and planes.
I'm asking because when I look in your background, there's a whole bunch stacked right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, those are Yeah, yeah, and there's more on the ground back there that are I actually have a decent sized one that's on the ground back there that
Yeah.
needs to be built. It's a pretty big plane actually. Fuselage I think is 60 inches long is the
Nice.
fuse. Yeah, it's a nice sized plane. It's a good sized plane. So if I had to add everything up, um, I between quads like FPV quads and planes, I'd probably be in the 40 to 50 range.
Oh, cool. Nice. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
it it is. It is. Most of my so I love the EDFs, flying EDFs, FPV. Like I
Hmm.
said, if I lived someplace where I could do a turbine, I would, right?
Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
me, EDFs are cool, and I really like. I have a bunch of like not a bunch. I have like three or four hand launch EDFs. Like I have an
Okay.
F-16
Hmm.
that's got an FPV setup on it that I can hand launch. It's a 70 millimeter. It's a fun little plane to fly, and I could throw it in the back of my car and go flying pretty much anywhere. It's a nice little park flyer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I do. I like the EDF jets. FPV, they're fun, and a lot of my other planes are like warbirds, and
Yeah.
some of those I collect kind of like I just like having them, like it's hard to explain. Like, 'cause I became like an aviation enthusiast. I took my private pilot's license. I took the test,
Hmm.
and but then once I just started researching like how much it was to actually go through it and rent a
Yeah.
plane, and it's not obtainable for me right now. It's something that
Yeah.
I'd have to do way down the road. And my
Yeah.
wife won't go flying with me. That's the other thing. She won't. She refuses to hop in a small plane with me. So I'm like, I'm not gonna go get my pilot's license if you're not gonna go flying with me.
Yeah.
Like,
Gonna go fly by yourself.
the whole point is if I get it, we rent a plane and like fly to the Bahamas for the
Yeah.
weekend. Like, I'm not gonna. Nope. She won't fly with me, and I'm not allowed to fly with the kids. So the whole thing is out. She refuses.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
And see, I'm a little bit of the opposite. I struggle with keeping planes that I don't fly. So my collection of aircraft is actually really small. Partly because of space, because everything I have is generally very large. But yeah, if I don't
right.
fly something like I've got a 55 cc Yak AeroWorks kit, so 55 cc gasser, and I haven't flown it for. I didn't fly it at all this year. A 26 cc gasser Taylor Craft, haven't flown that in 2 years. So it's like if they disappeared tomorrow, it doesn't matter. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting because I don't fully understand that side of it, but I respect the collecting side and stuff like that. But it's totally not me. It's as opposite as it gets. So
I don't think my wife understands it either,
yeah, for sure.
which is great because our just for everybody watching, our next episode is called "The Wives of RC," and
Hmm.
me and John are going to bring the wives on and let them take a shot at us on camera, and talk about how much they love our hobby.
Yeah,
So it's
that'll
going to
be
be
fun.
quite interesting. Quite interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So the funny thing is, out of my fleet, probably only half is up and running at any good time.
Yeah.
I've had days where I've gone to the field with 15 planes and I've come home with five of them that are still in flying condition. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had those days where
Yeah.
like it's just and the other thing is comparing the two, right? I you probably could 30 of my planes for the cost of one of yours.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I
Of
mean?
course.
So there's some cool stuff I have too though. So I have two, actually three VTOL planes. I don't know if you've seen those.
Yeah.
They're it's a combination of a quadcopter and a plane, so it'll take off vertically and then fly.
Okay.
So I have
Yeah.
three of those, which are cool. Which I could take off from my backyard and
Yeah.
fly, and then land in my backyard, which is nice.
Cool.
So it
Huh.
a lot of it is a mix of me enjoying certain aircraft and then also liking the technology behind some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's about.
Yeah.
It's some of the planes I have, run off of iNav or autopilot, and they have loiter mode on them or return to home mode. And so
Hmm.
I don't know. Do you know what loiter mode is? Because it's like a little
Like
bit of a different world. You
just
could flip
circle.
a switch. You can set up the parameters in your computer. You can flip a
Yeah.
switch, and it'll just fly circles over your head, or
Wow.
wherever you tell it to
Yeah.
loiter.
Yeah.
You could put pre-planned missions in on some of them, and it'll fly a specific waypoint mission, and then
Huh.
return around and come back home.
Interesting.
It's Yeah, it's cool stuff, and that's the stuff that I really enjoy the technology part of it and what
Yeah.
they can do. I love the flying, but I also enjoy the building and the technology
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah.
I
I
think
respect
that's
that.
yeah.
We had an interesting thing happen today. I was in the shop working today, and Katie comes in and she's like, "You got to see this drone outside." So I go outside, and we live out on an acreage in the country, and this drone apparently it's a huge unit. I didn't get to see it up close, but it flew over top of our property, and I think it was surveying the property next to us because it just was doing zigzags back and forth, and it was big enough that it was probably a couple miles away, and I could hear the
Yeah.
props on it and stuff working. So it was a
Yeah.
big sucker. But yeah, it's kind of interesting just to see that randomly fly over top.
It's going to be interesting
You
within
talking about that
next
made me think about it. So
No, and and that's one of the cool things that I think that's what's going to be great for our audience is, like I said, the meshing of the two worlds, right?
hmm
There's going to be people who follow you and your jets and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden
yeah,
spark interest by some of these conversations, right? And
yeah,
drones are going to be they're going to impact our lives in the next 5 to 10 years. Like, we're going to be getting
yeah,
packages delivered by them. I mean, almost every real estate person now has a drone guy that takes pictures of houses
yeah.
for them. Like, so it's going to be really interesting to see where it all goes. It's
Well, and
exciting
to
times.
be perfectly open about it, the drone guys, I'll just say the drone guys, get a lot of bad rap, right?
We do.
You know,
Absolutely.
you hear about all the negative things that happen in our hobby, and a drone getting in the way of a full scale airplane. It's just like, oh, the drone guys did it. Well, there's
Yeah.
responsible drone owners out there, and there's a lot of non-responsible drone owners too. So
There's bad actors.
yeah.
There's 100% bad actors. And look, I won't say that I have always followed the rules, but I've never done
Hmm.
anything stupid or put anybody in danger. Like,
Yeah.
it's I've seen, and heard of events where, like, there was a helicopter flying over like a fire scene, and the guy wanted to take a video of the
Yeah.
helicopter flying and decided to put his drone up in the air. It's like, you have to have common sense,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
and there's a lot of people who don't. And unfortunately, those few bad actors have, and maybe more than a few, but they've given the whole industry a black eye. They've
Hmm.
it's and that's where a lot of this regulation is coming from.
Yeah.
It's and that regulation, I don't know how bad it is in Canada, and I'm sure Canada will follow suit with what the United States is doing at some point and what Europe's doing. But it's going to affect the hobby and how we do things, how kids are able to learn. It's with this new regulation with the remote ID and stuff like that. It's kids can no longer have a model airplane club at their school and go out and fly
Yeah.
airplanes without having remote ID. It's going to put a lot of stuff in place. And now schools, so for instance, I fly at one of the local school fields, and I spoke to them about applying for FRIA status, and they're just worried about the whole regulation part of it. Like, they don't even want to
Hmm.
do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what's going to happen. So a
Yeah.
school is not going to want to have a drone program now because they're afraid of having to deal with the regulation.
Yeah. And
Like,
the struggle there is obviously they don't even want to entertain the process
Right.
because they just say no, the regulations, and they stop it right there. Right, you get stonewalled right away.
It's 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 not good for the youth, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff is going to be important for kids to learn. It's going to be a part of their everyday lives 20 years from
Hmm.
now. It's
Yeah.
going to be stuff they have to learn. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Well,
it's
here in Canada, we've had a really interesting. It's actually a really interesting 12 months. It was about a year ago that our basically our entire field system across all of Canada got shut down. So I think it was
wow.
like November-ish of last year. Basically, MAC, who is our version of your guys' AMA, they came out and said all the flying shut down, no fields are approved anymore, and it was a huge debacle trying to get things reapproved. So what happens now is, and this stuff is fairly common knowledge, I think, but excuse me, our all of our planes get classified as an RPAS, or remote piloted aircraft system, or a drone, right?
That's the same thing here. Yeah. For the most
Yeah,
part.
and then we have to take our drone exam. There's an advanced RPAS if you're flying anything big or flying in control airspaces. So we have to keep flight logs, maintenance records, and so yeah, things have changed a lot this year, and we weren't able to fly for the first few months of the year. Fortunately, it's winter for us,
Right.
but there was a lot of guys that, number one, they didn't want to, like, and it's usually the older fellows, or just fellows that don't want to be part of it. A lot of those guys basically said, no, I'm done with this. And a lot of the older guys, they didn't want to take the test. It's an online test, open book. Google's your friend. Um, but we've lost a lot of flyers this year because of that. And
Right.
there was fields up until like a couple weeks ago that they were completely shut down for the entire year.
So they
So
just came in and said because of this regulation or whatever, that's it. And then they made you guys
yeah,
work
I
through all
mean,
those steps to get all open
yeah,
again.
there's a
Wow.
lot of backstory to it, and I don't like the politics. I don't like
Right. Right.
politics
Right.
in the hobby, and I don't like politics in general. So I kind of stay out of it.
Right.
But yeah, they basically shut it down and said this is the new rules and regulations you need to follow if you want to get your field approved. And we've got weight limits that are more stringent, altitude restrictions which are insane compared to what we used to have. So here in Canada, if you go back 3 years, we had zero altitude restrictions basically, and we have no speed limit, and the weight limit was like 76 or 7 pounds, something like that. So that's the most your plane could weigh. And I think it was 2 years ago we got an altitude restriction of 700 feet, and you could apply for an exemption or
Waiver.
a little bit of leniency on it and get it up to
Right.
1,200 feet or something like that. And then what happened is all this stuff came out, so we now have an altitude restriction of 400 feet. Our weight limit is 25 kilograms, so that's times 2.2 is 55-ish pounds, 56 pounds, which automatically grounds a ton of aircraft because lots of guys have big aircraft.
Right.
So it's been a really challenging year. Hopefully things get better as time goes on, but it's been definitely a thorn in the hobby for us too. So
Yeah. I was actually because I was going to ask you about that before. You said your plane was 65 pounds, and I was like,
yeah,
in the U.S. it's 55 pounds, and then you have to like apply for a special exemption through the FAA to
yeah,
fly
you need your
anything bigger.
LTMA
And
one and LTMA two, and yeah.
right, it's you got to start going, and things got to get inspected. It's just
Hmm.
it's crazy, and especially where. So look, I understand it if you're near, like if you're near New York City, and you probably can't fly turbines by New York City, right? They're not gonna let you fly this giant 70-pound jet next to New
Yeah.
York City. But where you are, which is mostly country-ish, right? It's open land and
Hmm.
stuff. It doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
It just some of it doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is, with like the new remote ID rules and stuff like that, like they're not letting private people who own, if you own 50 acres and you wanted to turn
Yeah.
your land into a free, they're not letting you do that. It's like, what? I own 50 acres out in the sticks.
Hmm.
Like, why are you regulating me? Like, I see
Yeah.
a plane once every 5 days. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. It's
Yeah.
just over regulation. It's everywhere. It's crazy. And
It was kind of an interesting. So a couple weeks ago, I went to LA. I went there to fix a plane and then spend a couple days with Katie, with my wife, just visiting and visiting a friend. But I ended up going to the flying field with my friend, and so their flying field that we went to is the Apollo 11 field or something. So I don't know if you've ever been there, but you've
no,
got the Apollo 11 field. It's actually a pretty cool field. It's been there for tons of years. Like the older fellows that have been flying there the entire time, like they go there and like, yeah, this used to be all cornfield, right? Now it's all developed. So you've got this RC field in the middle of the city. Just to I think it's the north, there's an airport right there.
wow,
Um, and they've got a paved runway that's 600 feet. There's actually an FPV off to the one side, an FPV
of
race
course,
course type thing. Yeah, course. And then over on the other end, there's like a small foamy area. And this is all in this tight little area. And it was really well organized. Like guys, they've got crazy altitude restrictions too, but obviously there's restrictions in place, but it was well organized and the guys there were very respectful. When planes were taking off from the airport, they were like students flying Cessnas and stuff. They should turn off before they come over the flying field, but there's guys that came right over the flying field, like a couple 100 feet.
that's
And
funny.
that's really brings up the duty of the spotter, right?
Right,
Like at one
right.
point, my friend was flying and his spotter was standing beside him, and they're used to working together. And he's like, "Hey, keep it low. You got a plane. Okay, he's turned off. You're free." Like it was just really
Yeah,
well organized. So that's kind of the common sense that just makes sense.
right. And that's where people need to do, because if
Hmm.
not, we're going to have more regulation and it's going to get bad. And
Yeah.
like you said, I've seen a lot of people listing, yeah, RC groups and even Facebook and stuff. I've seen a lot of people listing these huge airplane collections with 30, 40
Yeah.
planes, getting out of the hobby. It's either that, like the old timer who's been in the hobby for a long time, doesn't want to deal with the regulation, doesn't want to deal with putting remote ID on his stuff, doesn't want to deal with
Yeah.
it, or it's everybody going, I'm not complying, I'm just going to fly
Hmm.
and figure it out. And that's a good portion of the people too. So it's just, there's got to be a happy medium, right? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
you can't kill the hobby, because the hobby's been around. Model aviation's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. It's been around longer than drones and a lot of other things. And the number of incidents of people dying from model aviation is like zero, right?
Exactly.
So it's like,
But
what are you
it's
doing?
been it's been well said that model aviation is a stepping stone for kids to get into full scale aviation, right?
Absolutely.
Because they come into model aviation, they develop a love for all things that fly, and that leads to career paths in aviation, whether it's being a pilot or all the plethora of different aspects. So
I taking that test, the private pilot's license, and that's kind of what happened with me. I mean, and I'm not a
mhm,
kid, and I didn't want to do it professionally, right? But taking that test, learning all the regulation and stuff, and then just learning about the flight characteristics, like it was a really cool journey learning about it.
yeah,
And it started out with drones and RC airplanes. Like,
yeah,
so it's got to get figured out, and hopefully there'll be, like I don't know, 400 feet for you with a jet. I mean, was a jet do 400 feet in? And is that like seconds? I mean, it,
well, pretty quick. If you're cruising along and you pull up in about 3 seconds, you're at 400 feet. So
right. So it's like, I don't know. The whole thing's crazy.
yeah,
So we're gonna get to wrapping up pretty soon, right? We want to thank everybody for watching this
yeah,
first episode. We're
for
gonna have
sure.
some great content, some great guests coming out. I don't know what, John. I was toying with a couple of things. We'll create a Facebook page for the podcast, and I was thinking maybe, I don't know, we highlight the best crash of the podcast kind of deal for the community. Have some fun with it. Maybe, I don't know, best build per podcast. Community member can share on our Facebook page, and we can highlight something like that. I'd like to
Yeah.
get the community involved in what we're doing here too, so it would make it fun for
Yeah,
them.
for sure. Anything but
So,
spam. That would be
and
awesome.
yeah, no spam. Spam is bad. Spam is very bad.
Some of the upcoming guests that we have, maybe we'll talk about that. So we already touched on the wives of RC.
Yep.
That's going to be our next one. So number 2. I know we've got Steve from FR Sky.
Yep.
Lined
Steve
up, right?
Schwelsinger from FR Sky, which I'm sure after John's transmitter video, that'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah, that's always that's been a fun few months dealing with the repercussions of that. So
I talked to Steve. Steve is super. He's a huge fan of yours. He's super excited to come onto the podcast. So
very cool.
And he's going to talk about some of the new stuff that FR Sky is doing, and it'll be good. Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
And we've also got Greg and Jenny Alderman from. So they've got their fingers in a lot of different things, but Greg is heli direct. Jenny does. I think she works for the AMA. And when we go to a jet event, Jenny takes tons of photographs and stuff. It's just phenomenal. So they also deal with heli direct, Boomerang Jets, Jag RC, they're Electron USA. So that'll be an interesting conversation. And they've been doing this together for a long time too. So yeah, some cool guests coming up.
Yep. And if you are in a position where you're with a manufacturer or something like that, and you want to come on, shoot us an email.
Yeah.
Or Facebook
so
message.
Our email is
yeah. rcairexperience at gmail.com.
Yes.
Yeah. Still getting used to that.
I'm at the point now, yes, that I'm thinking about all this stuff. It takes me a little bit of time to remember. So I actually have my cheat sheet right here.
Yeah. It's funny. I was like, wait, I have 10 different emails. Which one is it?
Totally.
Living in 2023.
Anthony, it's been tons of fun. This is a fun little project. It was kind of cool to get to actually have a conversation like this. This is the most we've talked together since we started discussing this stuff. So that was fun.
It was a good time. Thank you. And thanks for everybody for watching. And we'll post links to mine and John's channels when we post this. The links for our individual content will be down there as well. So thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. John. Take care.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
You bet.